Shavuot to everyone. I want to thank our sponsors for this week, Judith and Neil Halpern, Elishmat, Judith's mother, Goldie Baum, Golda Bat Yosef, Allah Shalom, whose first yahrzeit is on Wednesday, Chet Adar, her Neshama Shvan Aliyah. Thank Doreen and Beryl Eckstein sponsoring Le'ilan Ishmat, Beryl's brother, Rav Yechiel Tzvi, Ben Rav Shimon Aryeh, All Shalom. And thank also Chaya and Yoel Fuld sponsoring this week, celebrating the birth of a grandson a few weeks ago, Bechor to Naomi and Sruli, named Hillel Osher. I think his Pidyon Aben is later this week. Some mild stuff to the entire Fuld family as well. The Parsha Truma reminded me of actually a fond memory. When I was in fifth grade, we had a class project and built a Mishkan. Not to scale, of course, but huge, huge. It filled an auditorium. So it wasn't the Mishkan itself, but very similar in size. And we had the Mishkan and the Kalim, and everything was a wonderful way to learn. I got so excited that I bought a model Mishkan. This fifth grade, a model Mishkan to put together, and I had it for a few years. You had to paint it, and it's a wonderful way to learn about the Mishkan, an excellent educational toy. I imagine they still have them, although I have not heard about them for quite a while. So, what reminded me of this is on Friday, I was reading in the Wall Street Journal, letter to the editor, someone commenting on a book that was written about the world of toys and why Jews were so involved in creating toys. And she said it's because of Shabbat. That's plausible that parents needed ways to keep their children occupied on Shabbat. A lot of Jewish families play board games, and therefore it became a Jewish business. Well, what troubled me about it was that I'd given a whole series a few years ago entitled Great Gifts of the Jews, and this totally escaped me. I had a whole shiur, a whole lecture on the topic of entertainment, how Jews created Hollywood, how Jews really created the comic industry, and so many Jews, being creators of Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, they were all Jews. And one of the theories I had back then was that it was part in the 20s and 30s, it was part of the Jewish identity. We had so many enemies, persecutors, that we created these superheroes, people who just committed to justice. And I said back then, I think that's why Superman and Batman were given capes, because the capes reminded them of a talent. Why? Who needs a cape? That's why they wore capes. Well, this woman wrote a book. I'm sorry, a woman. I'm reading the review. Wrote a review of a book by Michael Kimmel, entitled "Playmakers: The Jewish Entrepreneurs Who Created the Toy Industry in America." And I vaguely knew of it, but not in specific. And I regret not mentioning it in the Great Gifts of the Jews. To start with a story, the famous story of President Theodore Roosevelt, who refused to shoot a bear on a hunting trip while he was vice president because the bear had been tied to a tree, and Roosevelt felt that was unsportsmanlike. You have to give the bear a fighting chance. The whole thing is inhumane. But besides that, someone read the story. Morris Michtam, who was the German immigrant, Russian Jewish immigrant, proprietor of a Brooklyn candy store, and he and his wife decided to pay tribute to Roosevelt and that to create a bear named after him, the teddy bear. And it's an interesting name, by the way, Michtam, like Michtam LeDavid. Michtam is either a type of musical instrument, or Rashi says Michtam is like a crown. So Morris and Rose Michtam created the teddy bear, marketed it, started to make other toys, and sold that right away. And they became the proprietors of the Ideal Toy Company, the largest doll manufacturer in America. And then it goes on and on. The founders of Hasbro. I never thought of it. Hasbro, the Hassenfeld brothers, Henry, Hillel, and Herman Hasbro. Mattel, Ruth and Elliot Handler, Lionel Corporation and the trains, I guess the logs, Joshua Lionel Cowan, and many, many others as well. So Kimmel questions like why? Why did Jews get involved in this? And he has a few theories. One of them is that, again, it was the search for their youth. Most All of these entrepreneurs were Jewish refugees from Germany and the Pale Settlement, and they had left at young ages. And they tried to recreate their youth, tried to give kids something that they could enjoy, something that would just give them unmitigated pleasure away from the difficulties of life. It was the childhood that they wish they had. All right, it's a plausible theory, but I like to think that maybe like a lot of refugees, a lot of survivors, they became entrepreneurs because they're very resilient and very adaptive, and they saw need and they took advantage of it. And then it reminds me of something that I read a few years ago. Really, a insightful story to show you what a normal Gaon was. That Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, when he was living in Monsey, was looking out his office window at Metifta Beit Shraga, and the kids were playing basketball. And some of the Rebbeim said to him, look at this Bittul Torah. And Rabbi Yaakov said to them, no, that's not Bittul Torah. They robbed me of my childhood because they said I was an Eloi. They didn't let me play games. You have to let children be children. And that's what toys do. They encourage imagination, creativity, who knows, maybe even entrepreneurship as well. From these toys to my model Mishkan, there's a lot we could learn from them. I'm glad the letter to the editor wrote about Shabbat. It's an angle as well, but I'm glad about the book as well. Another contribution, another gift to world culture, a positive, virtuous one of our co religionists. Shavua Tov.